The body was found in this rural area. There was no evidence in that area where the body was found that a struggle had taken place. What they did was use forensic entomology and palynology. So palynology is using like spores and pollen in a forensic setting. What they found was that
I'm Naman Pandey, and in this episode, featured not expert is Sara Gomez. Sara is a forensic science graduate from University College London with experience as a forensic biology research intern at the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner.
the COVID-19 pandemic happened. So I would spend my days quarantining and watching true crime documentaries.
Did you ever cover the deduction side of the house, or is that something that falls outside the wheelhouse of the forensic science?
Wow, so you go and dust the fingerprint and you get it.
Yeah, and you shine that ultraviolet light that shows where all the blood was.
Real life, in the sense that you never get a full, beautiful fingerprint on the door handle.
We go over Sara's journey through getting a master's degree in this absolutely fascinating domain. The subject matter the degree covers, absolutely crazy technology that's available in most forensic science labs. Also debunks so many myths that shows such as CSI and CID perpetuated over the years.
I would read some basics and come home and just don't know what to do with myself. Why do I decompress, you know?
In line with our theme of learning from somebody just 2 steps ahead instead of an expert, my goal is to highlight this amazing career track and how you can forge a career also in the forensic sciences. This is the readysetdo podcast, and subscribe for weekly episodes and daily clips featuring not experts from every field ever. And now, without any further ado, my friends, here's Sara.
Welcome to the Ready Set Do podcast, where we learn from journeys of not experts who are just 2 steps ahead of us.
Sara, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Really excited to jump into the fascinating world of forensics, and hopefully in a manner that is, slightly more informed than my very limited understanding that has come out of watching just some random shows here and there and a lot of Sherlock Holmes. So both outdated and misinformed here is what you're working with. So, just to get that out of the way. But to start off, what made you first get interested in this field? And can you walk us through you realizing that this is actually what I want to do in terms of a professional career?
Yes, of course. It all started during 2020. I was quite lost in what I wanted to do. I was currently pursuing a degree in neuroscience with a minor in economics. I didn't really know what neuroscience was before I joined, and then halfway through, I was like, maybe this is not for me. So I tried with my economics minor. Maybe I wasn't a science person. Maybe I just needed to be in a completely different field. Um, I also did not really enjoy that. So I was feeling quite lost at that point. And then the COVID-19 pandemic happened and we were locked down at home. And I just had a lot of time to be on the internet, right? Like everyone else.
Right.
And I found myself gravitating towards true crime a lot. So I would spend my days quarantining and watching true crime documentaries, and I couldn't stop.
What are some of your favorite ones? Like, what was the most watched show in that era?
I watched probably every single like serial killer documentary on Netflix. I loved all of them. So I watched all of them, and then I had an intrusive thought of what if I just do this for a living? Like I really enjoy watching them. So what if I just do it every day for a living and become part of it, right?
Yeah.
And I actually went through with it. I was like, okay, I think this is something I want to do. And during that period of time, everything felt so like final and like
Mm.
transcendental. Like everything felt like it was more purposeful. And I just said, I need to do this. I like it. So I decided to then, after finishing my undergrad, to pursue a master's in forensic science.
Awesome. So, just a quick follow up on what you said earlier. Something that caught my curiosity was you said you had started studying neuroscience, but kind of didn't really like it that much. So, I'm wondering where that gap came from. So, I guess I'm trying to understand what was the what was the specific thing around neuroscience that you thought would be different than what it turned out to be. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, yes, no, that makes sense. I think initially f- I'm always been interested in human behavior and why people do the things they do and why they act the way they do. So I thought neuroscience would give me more of an understanding of people it would help me understand people from a scientific point of view rather than, like a social point of view.
Yeah, I see.
Um, and I didn't really get that out of my program. It felt like a lot of the stuff that we were learning and working towards was very preclinical trial, was mostly focused on medicine rather than what I wanted to get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes total sense. And the reason I asked was I had a bit of a similar ish journey where back in high school I really wanted to be a doctor. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll study biology. It's just biology. But turns out what nobody told me at the time was that when they say biology, like 40% of it is just plant stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And I was like, "Oh my gosh, how is me learning about the 16 different steps in photosynthesis ever going to help me treat humans and their diseases? Why am I studying this?" And obviously, suffice to say, I pivoted to tech, which is the exact opposite direction of biology. But I can relate to what you're saying, where you have a certain perception of an idea when it comes to a degree, and then when you start, it's just nothing like what you had hoped. So glad you were able to jump out. From there, I'm kind of interested in exploring what can you give us like a just a very brief flavor of kind of the various type of programs that exist, or is it just like the main common single program around forensics that's pretty common across the world? And then how you went about shortlisting where you wanted to get that master.
Yes. So forensic science, it's quite a straightforward path in the US. There is a forensic science masters. I think there's a couple of universities that do it as undergrad programs. But I'm not very sure about that. I know there's a few master's program, not many options, but they're usually a 2-year program and they prepare you with the science side of it. I think there's also a few programs, especially in George Washington University down in Washington, D.C., that has more of like the social science side of it. Um, but I personally decided to go abroad for my program. I did my master's in crime and forensic science at University College London. And I I was between that program and UCL. There's also King's College in London that also has a forensic science program, and George Washington. So I was either I want to stay here, stay in the US, move to Washington, D.C., or go abroad. I ended up going abroad for a few different reasons. Would you like me to get into that?
Yeah, I would love to explore those. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, and the masters in the US are 2-year programs, and you have a long summer break in between. Programs in the UK are 1 year
Oh,
generally, and intense 1 year, so like 12
mm,
months, very short breaks, if at all, right? Time-wise, I felt like it was easier for me to commit to a 1-year program, especially because this was an idea that came out of almost
yeah.
nowhere, I wanna say. So
Yeah.
making a 2-year commitment for an intrusive thought, it felt a bit much. So I think in my mind was easier to rationalize just going for a 1-year
Okay.
program. So that was a moving force. I also wanted to have a cultural exchange and
Sure.
study abroad experience, and that was important to me. And ultimately, financially, it made sense also to
Okay.
to go abroad because I was only gonna spend 1 year of rent and food and travel, tuition, compared to 2 years, in the US.
Interesting. And something that I've seen just generally with study abroad stuff is that for a lot of programs that are 1 year, because their tuition is so I guess they just price the per credit cost in a very, sketchy, not sketchy, but kind of under the curtain manner so that it kind of becomes the same. But it sounds like in this case, there was like a difference between the 2 year and the 1 year program in the US and UK, just to confirm.
Yes, yeah. And so it came out, let's say, slightly more affordable to go to the UK. Not a huge change, but I
I
think
see.
when you factor in, transportation and rent and
And the time, right? The whole year is a lot of time that I'm sure I know you're going to be starting working, and we'll get into that in just a second. But yeah, you would probably still be stuck in college if
right.
you hadn't gone for that, and wouldn't be able to recoup your investments as soon as you're being able to currently. So appreciate that deep dive. That makes a lot of sense. And then, so from there, naturally, very curious to learn about. And this is something that, again, I didn't let my intrusive thought ever get to the degree that yours did, which I commend you for. But I have always wondered, what is it like to study? So basically, just looking for what it is that you were taught, just broad level. And then maybe if you can share one or two, especially like any courses that were especially good, that left a mark on you, that you were like, wow, that's so cool. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So I think forensics, even though it's a very niche field, it also has a lot of specialities within it. Broadly, forensic science is more of the study of factors that contribute to crime, includes, crime prevention, detection, all of this. So in my specific course, we studied the theory of crime, why crime happens, but we also go into the science of it. So does the science that includes the biology, the chemistry, the geology, these other smaller areas that cross over with traditional, natural sciences. So for example, there's courses. The one I personally enjoyed the most was CSI. So, it reminds you of
Yeah,
traditional forensic files and like,
yeah. Remind me what that stands for. Like, what's the full form? Sorry.
yeah, so CSI stands for crime scene investigation.
Right. That's right.
So it entails going out to the crime scene and physically collecting evidence.
Wow.
And
So cool.
yeah, I love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
feel like I was in a movie. I got that class. You had the hazmat suits and the masks and the evidence bags that you have to put the single hair strand in and all this stuff. I absolutely loved it. And I think ultimately that's where I want my career to go. So that's something I enjoy quite a bit.
And then for that same course, I guess, is there both a theory and practical component, or is the entire course just a bunch of practical experiments, kind of?
There are both sides to it. There's a theory in the sense of there are processes that you have to follow in order to collect evidence, and
I see.
in a sense that in a way that it's going to be acceptable by court. But there's also a practical side of it when you go into a mock scene and collect evidence.
Got it. And did you ever cover, this stuff on the, what's the word, the deduction side of the house, or is that something that falls outside the wheelhouse of forensic science?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because that was something that I was looking for in my program. And that ultimately helped me decide between King's College and UCL.
I see.
King's College was focused primarily on the science and just doing what you need to do with that evidence. But UCL was a bit more inclusive in their program in the sense that they wanted you to have like the intelligence side of it and more of the investigation side as well as the science. So we did get a bit of that. There are optional modules you can take on counterterrorism and like crime prevention, intelligence, and all this stuff, counterintelligence.
Huh. That's that's so cool. And do they also teach you stuff that goes on in the laboratory itself? Like, so you mentioned that you have that single strand of hair. Do they also teach you how or what to do with that? Like when you put it under the microscope or something? I don't know if this is something you do, but
um, I didn't specifically go into that.
Okay, but you could
We
have.
do more of the theory, yeah. Not so much of like going ourselves into the lab and learning those things is more on the theory side.
And so, because you mentioned theory, do they also have these? So, like, for example, personally, I went to like a business school, right? So, the way they teach business there is they bring up cases in the past that, in such and such year, this company faced this problem. So, they did this. And this is such a important lesson to know that you can then apply that to other problems like this that appear in the future. So, do you have this in like the forensics, broader umbrella where there are some really famous cases that you come across again and again, which are used as a learning method for students, or is that not something that happens?
Yes, yes, it definitely happens because forensics is sort of a practitioner-led discipline where all the new innovations happen as a response to difficulties and challenges that practitioners face. So we study all of our historical data to see patterns, patterns in crime and
Yeah.
patterns in science and behavior. So I would say most of the forensic science discipline right now is has come out from history and
Awesome.
historical cases. Yeah.
So that's very fascinating to me. Do you have maybe a case or two that comes to mind that stuck with you in that, okay, that was a cool case that, anybody listening would be able to understand or relate to?
Yeah, yeah, those are a very interesting case. Not sure about details, but I vaguely
That's fine.
remember it because I wrote a paper on it.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Love it. Let's.
So there was a case about a murder that happened, I think, in Europe, and it was a long time ago. So the body was found in this rural area, kind of just left there to decompose, hopefully, I guess. So it was found, but they weren't sure what had happened, how did it happen, where. There was no evidence in that area where the body was found that a struggle had taken place. There's certain patterns in, blood spatter or disturbance of the area that you would expect where you have crimes, especially if they're violent. You would expect to see certain things that weren't there. So they were like, okay, what happened here? Was it a cleanup? But it just looked undisturbed. Like the grass around it was not stepped on. So what they did was use forensic entomology and pollinology. So pollinology is using like spores and pollen in a forensic setting. So what they did was take swabs from the inside of the nose of this the corpse, the body, and match it to the vegetation in that area. And what they found was that the last place where that person had been breathing before, was not where the body was found because the spores and the pollen did not match the vegetation. So they found that that body had been moved after that. And they had very accurate information of the topography in that area, the what kind of trees grow in what place, and they were able to then match, like pinpoint the place where that person had passed away. And I just saw I would have never that would have never crossed my mind. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, who would think that unless you're literally Sherlock Holmes or somebody? But so I guess from that story, is it the job of the forensics? Actually, first of all, what are you all called? Are you the forensics expert, or what's the term? Like what
Um,
would you be?
a forensic scientist, I would say.
Scientist. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So is it then the job of the forensic scientist to swab the nose and then come up with this plan? Or is it like the detective that tells him that, hey, I need you to find the spores or pollen from the nose of this corpse? Does that make sense? Like whose responsibility is it that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would say it's a joint effort. I
Oh.
think the forensic scientist would be the primary responsible because we have the training in this. We know what technology is available. So I think the forensic scientist is in a position to suggest a lot of these tests, but it depends on the politics of each department and
Absolutely. Yeah.
each,
Yeah. I mean,
jurisdiction.
exactly. Yeah. There's always moving parts. But so it sounds like there can be disagreements sometimes between the forensic scientist and the, detective or whoever police person is in charge.
Yeah. I'm sure these situations can happen, but ultimately, a forensic scientist wants to collect as much information as possible, and then the detective can decide which evidence and what pieces of it to use.
Mm.
But it's better to have more, right? It's always better to have more than less.
Cool. Cool. So we covered some of the main subjects that you liked, which included crime, so the theory of crime, all of the other factors associated with that. You also covered the laboratory aspect of its CSI. Any other courses slash experiences that stood out from your time during your masters?
I think overall I had a very positive experience within my master's. I think something that contribute was that my class was very small, and that's something I really appreciated. I think my graduating class is about 21
Wow,
people.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got chance to collaborate with my professors, get to really know their research, what they work on, what they're passionate about, and it really made a difference for myself. For example, during my dissertation, I wrote my thesis on digital forensic science.
Oh,
So I focus on using the call detail records that your provider logs every time you make a call or send a text, every time you connect to a cell tower that is logged by your provider. So what I wanted to do is use these records to triangulate location of a device at the time of a crime. So
uh-huh.
if someone commits a crime at 3 p.m. today, then I can go back and see where their phone was at 3 p.m. and
Even if
they
they weren't
at the
making a call, you can tell.
they
Wow,
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
cool. Yeah,
Um and I only got to do this because my program was so small. I got to know a professor who has done work in this area before, and he had connections or contacts in the provider in the UK, like the digital forensic provider in the UK, who was also open to collaborate with me. So all these connections I was only able to make because I had such small class size, I think.
amazing. And then are internships a thing in these masters, or is it kind of a one and done type of thing?
There are no internships during this masters because it is so intensive. There are no gaps. So usually in the US, people will have summer internships, but no, not in this program.
Got it. And so, did you then get a chance, or since you've graduated, have you gotten a chance to professionally apply any of the skills that you've learned during your masters?
Um, no yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, starting work soon.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I guess so that kind of leaves the door open, right, to what kind of roles slash what type of organizations. So, are you kind of limited to the I mean, I think it is the government in one form or the other. Or actually, that's not true. I think there are some security or private security agencies. But actually, can you help paint a picture for what type of jobs kind of open up once you have a degree in forensic sciences?
Yes, it is. It is a small job market for forensic scientists, and I have to be completely transparent about it because I feel like I'm selling a Netflix documentary here. That sounds really fun, but I have to be very honest about the job market, which is tight. So in the US, forensic science is provided by the state or the federal government. So at least in New York City, which is where I'm based, there is no private industry for forensic science. So my job opportunities are based on federal, FBI, CIA, DEA,
Yeah.
related acronym places. And also the state or the city government.
Got it.
If you want to do like straight forensic science, forensic biology, where you're in the lab with the fingerprints, the hair, all of this is city government based jobs. Um, if you, yeah, I don't really know how you can use this master's specifically in the private industry.
Yeah, yeah. So I will, clarify. When I first asked that question, I didn't realize that if you're doing forensics, there's probably crime involved in some way or the other. I mean, for the most part, right? And then
It's
if,
all crime.
yeah, yeah. And if there is crime, then I don't think there is any private institution that has access or jurisdiction to, investigate that. Like that has to be a law enforcement. What you're saying, definitely checks out. And but the process of applying is the same. You just kind of go on these government websites or, try and come up with connections, etc. on LinkedIn and reach out to them and kind of see how it goes. Or are there like you have to write a paper or something? Or, how
Yeah.
that look like?
It looks like a traditional
Oh,
job hunting search that you go on government websites and fill out forms and hope for the best.
got it.
Yeah, it's traditionally, yeah,
And
that
then
would work.
in your masters, do they also kind of put you, in like real life simulations of what it will be like once you're working in the field full time? Or maybe have you talked to, any person that has been doing this, for a really long time to kind of pick their brain around how it all goes by chance? Just on the field itself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We're very fortunate to have a lot of outside practitioners coming to talk to us and participate and collaborate during lectures. So we have heard from people who have been in the field for a while and people who have been in the field for not that long as well. So um, it looks good at the other end. You can really see people that they are very passionate and they love what they do and they love having a tangible impact in society. Um, and that's enough for me.
No, absolutely. I can think of very few ways to make, an impact like this, than the one you are. And having come kind of full circle where you started with watching all these shows and then you went ahead and upskilled yourself at in a foreign country, got your degree, you graduated, and now knowing what you know, would you say that the usual depictions of forensics in our pop culture, TV shows, movies, are they mostly accurate, or can you tell us some things that they all get just completely wrong and you're like, this is not how this happens?
Yeah.
All of them get this wrong?
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that a lot. People are like, wow, so you go and dust the fingerprint,
Like,
get it.
and you shine that ultraviolet light that shows all where all the blood was and
Right.
stuff like
Well,
that.
no, it's not very much like it in real life, in the sense that you never get a full beautiful fingerprint on the door handle. You never get a full hair strand with the root attached. It's never the murder weapon is never just laying around covered in blood. You don't really see this. It's not a quick process. It's not just an in and out, you go crime scene, all the evidence is lined up for you with beautiful yellow numbers and you collect that and leave. It's a very time consuming process to go. I think it's also not depicted the emotional stress that comes along with performing these jobs. You are seeing the worst of society day in and day out, and it really wears on you. I think you need to have a very specific personality to be able to cope with all the stress and the negativity that you're surrounded in this field. And I think that's something that people don't see on TV shows.
I want to explore that, what you said about that personality a little bit. What is that? And I know obviously it won't be a one direct answer, but what are some of the characteristic traits that generally belong to that personality of that type of person that does really well? in this type of situations.
Yes, I think people who last long in these fields are people who are able to compartmentalize their job in their personal life because you want to be able to perform your best a job where you're at work, but you also need to be able to leave work and leave work behind. Like when you step out at the office, you need to go back to being yourself and doing the things that make you happy and spending time with the people you love. And that's not easy, sometimes. I think that's also a learned skill. I think that's something that you don't really need in many other areas of your life and many other fields. So part of it's learned, but um not everyone can learn it, right?
Is that something you've started working towards, or where do you stand personally when it comes to that, teaching yourself how to compartmentalize?
I think I'm in the process of it. I definitely feel like I've been getting better and better. It also, I guess, has helped me that I watch and consume so much true crime. So I'm a little more desensitized than the average public, you know, than the average person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm kind of able to approach crime and approach these situations from a clinical point of view and a very scientific point of view, where it's like, okay, my goal is to find this, is to do this, and I just work towards that goal. I reach the goal. Okay, that was done and closed. Let's move on to the next. And so I'm in the process. Still, sometimes happens that I would read things, I would see things during my masters that I go to bed at night and I'm like, oh, I don't want to think about this anymore. Why am I thinking about this? It's a process, yeah.
absolutely. It almost reminds me of the of doctors. They kind of have to do something similar where you it's just a body to you. You can't think of that as as a mother, a father of somebody. It's just a body, because once you get emotionally invested, that probably starts to interfere with how good of a job you can do in that situation, and you only exist to do the best job that you can in the first place, right? So would you say that parallel kind of holds true, or not really?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it, I think, because doctors also encounter so many emotionally stressful situations. I think you have it's a tricky balance. You need empathy and you need to remember that, you need to do your best for this person, but you can't put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. And something else you said a while back kind of piqued my curiosity. You said you almost never find a complete fingerprint, or, like a complete like strand of hair. So from there, I'm trying to understand that I'm sure there must be so much technology that the outside world doesn't really know about when it comes to specifically the forensic sciences. So are you able to shed some light on what type of tools, or maybe technologies of any sort, really? I use technologies as a very big, broad umbrella term that might exist out there that you have seen or used or have heard of, but that would surprise the average listener, and such as myself, because I'm obviously not from this field.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think, let me think. Technologies, there's so many. I'm only familiar with
Yeah.
some that I've used before. Like for example, during my internship, um, in the office of the chief medical examiner, I was part of the forensic biology department as a researcher, and I got to use a machine that can separate female from male DNA. It's used in cases of sexual assault, and it's so powerful that it can pick up on only a few cells. So you don't need a full, drop of blood or bodily fluid or anything. It can separate cells at quantities that are almost incomprehensible for us. And I was blown away.
Wow. Huh. I mean, I don't even know how to start thinking of that, but sorry, I'm just a little confused. So you said this was at your internship
Yeah.
that you were doing? Got sorry. Yeah, I thought, yeah. So remember when I asked if you had gotten the chance to apply this in a professional field? Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right. So let's go back to that.
yeah. So I would love to explore. So obviously, let's start here in terms of the this machine. So just so I understand, what you're saying is, you put in, just say you find like a blood droplet, and you can just, I guess, what does this machine look like? Is it kind of like a little cup,
Okay.
or yeah?
Yes. So I did this internship between my um bachelor's and my master's during that summer. It was before I went to do my master's.
I
So
understand the
I would
confusion
write
now.
lost
Yeah,
there too. I had no clue what I was doing.
I
But so I was researching different kits, like let's say kits, sexual assault kits that are used to kind of separate, the female DNA from male DNA, and then use that male DNA to extract a DNA profile.
to
So,
match with
y-
potential
right,
perpetrator.
right,
Okay,
right. So if you get a DNA profile, you can then upload it to a national database called CODIS, and everyone who's been to jail is in this database. So that's a way that they use this DNA profile to see if there's a match or not. Um, so this machine, going back to it, it looks like an old printer, kind of.
okay,
And imagine you're opening the lid of it, and then it's a bunch of little holes, and that's where you're gonna put your test tubes in.
got it.
You close it and you click, and it just does the magic. You get a report from it.
That is so cool. I can't believe this. Because in my mind, anything related to DNA consists or starts and ends with at least, a microscope. Like, I cannot comprehend that there's no microscopes involved in this entire process.
No.
Yeah. And that, like, shockingly is for me the most crazy aspect of all of this. So that's really cool. That is exactly the type of cool tech that I was
Yes, but
looking to explore.
I guess to give you a better idea, so what you get in a sexual assault kit from the hospital is swabs, just cotton swabs. And then from that cotton swab, you're going to prepare a mixture. So you're going to cut a piece of it, put in a test tube, add different components, different chemicals to it to kind of like break down the skin or like the cell barrier, release the DNA, all of this. But you're using pipettes. At no point you're really using a microscope.
Gotcha.
So you're doing all of these in test tubes. And then those test tubes you're going to put in the machine and get a profile
I
out of
see.
that.
I mean, a part of me is obviously, just kind of saddened by the fact that this needs to be done, especially because of the subject of, kids that are assaulted sexually. But on the other hand, it is, you still have to do it because obviously they need to get justice. Like, you can't just leave that be. So, how was that experience like for you? And it sounded like, especially around this time, you weren't even sure that you wanted to do a master's and such. So, how was that like for you?
It was difficult. It was very eye-opening. Um, Again, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I knew this was a topic that I was interested in, but my only knowledge of it was from media. So going into this internship, it was a reality check. It was like, it's always been stories on the screen, but now there are real people to this. There are names attached to it, their addresses, their ages, their things that just make you realize these are lives, these are people's real people. And then it really hits home when you see maybe that a crime happened at an address or that you've been at, that you've passed before you walked, or is near someone you love, or like
Yeah.
it's someone age that reminds you of someone, and then you really make that connection of holy moly, this is real. And I had that
Wow.
moment of realization, and I think a lot of people would have run the other way and go back to like a neuroscience job, but I think it just made me want to be there even more. And now I felt like it was my responsibility to do something about it and be part of the solution.
Exactly.
But it definitely, um, it was very hard for me to do this thing we were talking about, compartmentalizing. And
Right.
I would leave, read these stories because you have access to like police reports and stuff. So I would read some of these things and come home and just don't know what to do with myself.
Man.
How do I decompress?
Yeah, like how do you decompress from that? It's
Yes.
just
But I had to ground myself and then remind myself of my coping mechanisms and the things I love and that bring me happiness. And it worked. And eventually I got better and better at it.
a little bit of a meta question, I guess, but has your perspective of the world changed for the better or the worse from your gaining expertise in this field, just really around crime in general? Are you more of a skeptic now, or are you more of an optimist, or has there been no change in your general overview of the world itself?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I wish I could say I'm positive and optimistic, but not really. I think I just see the worst in society and I see the worst in people. And I the work never ends. Like every day there's something else. Every day there's something new. So it's definitely made me a lot more aware of what's out there for good or for bad. Um, but I think just and maybe it might be a selfish reason, but feeling like I'm doing and part of the solution, it just makes me feel good about myself and like okay, at least I'm doing something. But deep down, I'm like, oh my goodness, this world is messed up.
I mean, so what you said around the selfish, I feel like it's perfectly okay to be selfish if it helps the world and other people. I feel like that's completely fine. But obviously, that's a very small part of what you just said. And I really appreciate and admire not only your honesty, because I don't know if I would be able to admit that, but clearly you have, and it shows that you've done your introspection, you're self aware enough to know that, it's a challenge that you face, but you also know why you do it, right? And I think that why is what drives you, which is really cool to me. And also, you had shared earlier that during your master's, you met other people, your mentors, that have literally devoted their whole lives to this. And I could tell that you look up to them and you see yourself doing what they did with their lives. And, what else is the point of any work other than to, leave a lasting impression and hopefully leave the world better than we found it. So yeah, again, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but last question here before I let you go is, um, how have you um, how have you navigated your entire professional journey across two continents now, while not being a native, English speaker? Has that opened, or have you had to struggle with some closed doors that exist for people that don't speak English natively? And if so, how have you navigated?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's been a challenge. I moved to the United States when I was 15. So I was the first one in my family to navigate higher education in the US and abroad in the UK as well. So I didn't have a familiar figure telling me how to do things, where to start, who to ask help for
Yeah.
him, like just nothing. So I think I had to do that myself. I had to go to people. I have to be very proactive in my journey. And it wasn't without challenges. I was very introverted when I was younger. I was very shy and very self-conscious of my accent and just my story kind of. So I had to step out and break out of my shell and just ask for help. I happen to come across very helpful people in my journey that have believed in me. One of them being my supervisor during my undergrad. She was the director of the Neuroscience program, and she supported me through my entire time there, and then supported me when I shared that I wanted to do forensics afterwards. She completely believed in me and offered me her like help in anything. Um, I also like came across very helpful people during my internship. People who gave me the opportunity to go to the office of the chief medical examiner just from reading my resume and like believing in me.
Yeah.
That's it. I had no one to back me. I was new, so they gave me a chance, and I think I wouldn't have pursued this career without them. You know.
Mhm.
So it was very challenging for sure, but asking for help was always my best friend. I was not ashamed anymore. I was like, "Help me, someone, please. I'll do my part, but just tell me where to go, where to start."
That's actually such great advice. It's just, along the lines of closed mouths never get fed. Like if you
Yeah.
don't ask for help, of course, you're not going to get it. But look at how it panned out for you because you asked for help, because, some stranger took a chance on you. You were able to deliver the work for them that they wanted. You were able to help, children that needed the most help, probably, and, in the whole world. So, yeah, I mean, I do a lot of these, but seldom do I feel at the end of one of these conversations, just so so much more richer in terms of my understanding of, really just the world, but also just all of the moving parts that are involved with undergoing something like you did, where you just start with this idea that, hey, that looks cool. How
Yeah.
crazy would it be if I did it? And then you actually went ahead and did it, which I feel like, yeah, it's so on point for the whole theme of this podcast, which is that, you know, just start, like, just take that first step. Everything else will, fall into place. It's all about, just the do aspect of it rather than waiting for somebody to say ready, set, go, instead just ready, set, do. So, really want to thank you for taking the time here today to share your experiences with us, to share your journey with us, and really looking forward to the amazing work that you'll be doing, and to remaining connected with you on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and hopefully maybe a guest appearance down the road in one of those shows that kickstarted this whole journey for you.
Of course. Thank you so much for listening to my story and
That brings us to the end of that episode with Sara Gomez. I was just blown away by how much she shared, and especially that example around how they found the murderer for that corpse using pollen tracing. That was crazy. Thank you all for sharing these episodes with those that continue to benefit from them. If you would like to support me, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing on my YouTube channel and leaving me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify or any of your favorite podcast apps. Catch you all in the next one. New episodes every Wednesday.